there, guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to repair a desk lamp. I know, repairing a desk lamp. What the heck does that have to do with woodworking? Well, it's simple. I have this desk lamp that I've used for quite some time, and I really like it, and it mounts with this clip, this kind of alligator clamp thing. And today, I don't know quite how I did it, but I broke it. And I thought it would be a good exercise and a good show idea that we go the extra mile, that instead of just pitching this lamp, which didn't cost very much, I thought that we would try to make a repair by possibly making a base for it and modifying the entire thing to be usable once again. So with that being said now, let's head over to the bench and see if we can't dissect this thing a little bit so that we can see if it's even possible. Well, here we have our decrepit, poor, injured desk lamp, and I think the first thing that we're going to have to do with it to see if it's even workable as some kind of project is to get this clip off. And by looking on the inside, I can see that there's a threaded rod there, a hollow one that will house the electrical wire to run up to the top head of the lamp. And it's held in place with a lock nut right there. And I'm just going to get in there with a pair of needle nose pliers and see if we can't loosen off that lock nut and get this particular clamp pulled off of the gooseneck of this desk lamp. Just to assist me in keeping this thing open, I've got a quick grip there holding the clamp open. And like I said, we're just going to loosen off this nut. It's a little cumbersome to get in there and get it loosened, but it is coming. And there we go. We'll get that out of there. Once we get this loosened off, we should just be able to pull this gooseneck right out of this clamp, but we'll also have to contend with the cable that is woven through this particular clamp. So let's get that taken apart, shall we? I got tired of messing around with that silly little nut that's in there, so I decided that seeing this base here, or this clamp, was not going to be kept as part of the lamp, I would just cut this particular part off. So we're going to cut it off and get the cable all pulled out from it, and then we should just be left with this gooseneck and the cord. Well, now that we have it pulled apart, we need to get a piece of stock for the new base. And for that, I'm not going to use anything special. I mean, this was not a super expensive lamp, but I think I'm just going to get a piece of pine and see what I've got up in the rack, and we'll go from there. Well, I have this piece of pine, and it's a leftover scrap from our vegetable bin build, so that's good that that'll get used up. I'm going to just mark a center line on here. It doesn't have to be exact. It's just going to give me somewhere to place the compass to draw our circle for our base. And from here, now that I have the center marked, I just want to see what the biggest circle is that I will get out of this. And if I really push the limits, I could get potentially an 8-inch circle, but I don't think I'm going to go that far. I think I'm going to go 7 inches. So I'm going to set my compass for a 3.5-inch radius kind of thing, or set it at 3.5 inches rather, and then draw my circle of my my desk lamp base. And with that initial circle drawn, I'm going to take it over to the scroll saw and we'll just cut just to the outside of this line, because we're actually going to true this up on the lathe to make sure that it's nice and centered and perfectly circular. We're just going to trim off that excess just to make it easier to rotate on the saw. Now that I have it cut to its rough size, I've just mounted it between centers here, and I'm going to use a roughing gouge just to take it down to make sure it's perfectly circular. Well, now that you have that done, you should have a base that looks something like this, and you can see that the lamp will sit in the middle of that sort of thing. Well, now what we're going to want to do is add a profile to the side of this, this disc. And I think it's just going to be a simple profile, probably a 1/4 inch round over. And I'm just going to use my trim router to go around the outside edge and give us that nice rounded profile. I've given the base a good sanding after doing the round over, and we now need to get a hole through the center here that is going to allow our post to go down through. So in measuring the post, I can see that I'm going to need a 1/2 inch hole. Now that's not the only hole that we're going to need, because the nut that comes up from the bottom, in measuring that, I need a minimum clearance on that of 3/4 of an inch. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole from the bottom side now at 1 inch, and not a through hole, just maybe half of the way up, so 3/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to do a 1/2 inch through hole the rest of the way. That way my post will be able to come down through, and I'll have a 1 inch hole with a 1/4 inch clearance on either side to be able to spin that nut in. Now when drilling these holes, you want to make sure that you're drilling the larger hole first. And what that'll do is at the base of that hole, it will give you a divot to line up your next bit so that the holes are centered on each other. And now that we have the 1 inch hole drilled, I'll carry on through with the 1/2 inch. We've given our holes here a light sanding, and we'd like to piece it together now just to get a test fit. The problem is, of course, how do you get this plug down through this hole? And this is the part that some of you may not like. Bottom line is, we need to cut this plug off. But before we do that, if the wire on it has no definitive markings as to the polarity of it, because this is a polarized plug on the end, polarized meaning that one blade is wider than the other and it can only go in the receptacle one way. What you want to do, and I'll show you how to do that, is you want to split these two wires apart and mark either end of this before you cut it, so that you know which one definitively goes with what. So you just want to take your wire and directly in the middle of it, you can just plunge a knife down between them just like that, and then just pull it through, and you can see how easily that cuts. Once you get it started, I mean, you can pull this if you want, you can separate the whole thing, but you really don't need to do that. At this point, it doesn't even matter which one is positive or negative. Yeah, I know there's those of you going to say, wait a second here, this isn't a battery he's talking about. Yeah, I know. But I'm just saying, for polarity, in terms that everybody can understand, positive and negative, or if you want to get technical here, the line and the neutral on this side, you just want to make sure that you have the two sides of the cord identified as to which goes with which. We're not going to get into which one is the hot and which side is the neutral. So we have that one side marked. We're just going to pull it tight, and then basically just cut your cord cap off. Guys, please make sure this is unplugged. And now that we have that cord cap off, we can remove this nut. We can place our wire down through the hole, just like so. Feed it all the way through. And once we get it fed through, we've got that wire loom that goes around the outside of this gooseneck. That's this black stuff here. We can pull it up through, get it lined up with our hole, and then with the nut, slide it up onto the wire, and then tighten it just to do the test fitting to make sure that everything fits together. And with the test fit done, everything looks pretty hunky-dory, except for this. And that's because, of course, the cord just sticks out the bottom, and that really doesn't work very well at all, does it? So there's a couple methods that we can use here to correct this. You can route a groove from the center here out, and you could epoxy that in, finishing, of course, with a hole that would be drilled into the side here, just to make it a little neater. You could also just drill the hole straight through into this center recess and feed the wire all the way through. There's several methods that you can do. I will actually end up having feet on this, so I'm not too concerned about the fact that the wire sticks out the bottom like this, because the feet are going to raise it up as such, and it'll make it so that it's not resting on that cable at all. But that being said, I don't have any feet right now, so we can make some wooden ones and glue on the bottom, or we can just place the wire in a groove, as I said, and go from there. But either way, let's look at now how to get this cord cap back on to the end here. Before I move on with the cord cap, I've actually found some little rubber feet in my hardware bins and jars and whatnot. So I'm going to screw these little rubber feet onto the bottom of our lamp base, and when I get that done, I'll come back and see you. And there we are, 4 feet mounted on the bottom of our lamp, alleviating our problem with the cord. Now those are temporary on there. I don't really like them. I think I will be picking up some new ones to place on this lamp, ones that are a little lower profile and a little nicer looking. Well, now it's time to get into replacing this cord end and putting it back to normal. And if you don't have things like a soldering iron and that sort of thing, well, maybe you might just want to go to your big box store and pick up a new cord end for a couple bucks. But for me, what I'm going to do is I am going to strip this wire back, and I am going to solder the ends back together in the same configuration that they were, remembering that I marked which ones go with which with the black tape. Before I solder them, I'm going to slide some shrinkable tubing over top of this cord. It shrinks up with heat, and by doing that, once I get the joint done and taped up and isolate it so that they're not going to short out on each other, I'm going to slide that shrinkable tubing over top of the entire joint assembly and put it back together. So I'll just show you quickly the process of that, and we'll bring this project to almost a close. So I'm just stripping the ends of the wire back to give me some room to solder the pieces back together. And now I'll have to get out my soldering iron and my shrinkable tubing. Well, the thing with this heat shrink tubing is you want to slide it on far enough away from the heat of, I keep saying soldering iron, but I'm using a soldering gun. You want to slide it on far enough away so that the heat from your soldering doesn't activate the shrinking action of it. And then once you get that together, you've got your marks here for which ones go hand in hand. And what I'll do is I'm going to strip them just a little bit longer, and we'll twist them together. Just like that. And what I like to do is twist them in line. I don't like this big bulky joint in the middle of the cord. So we're just going to twist them in line, and just like that. You can see that there, how it's together. And then I'm just going to solder this joint, and then I'll do the same with the other remaining connection. There you go, there's one done. And we'll do the same with the other side, or the other wire. And once you get those pieces soldered together and they've cooled, I stress the fact that, and they've cooled so that you don't burn your fingers. You want to isolate the two, because if these two metal parts here touch together, you've got a dead short, and then you're going to have some problems. But once they've cooled, you can place some electrical tape on that connection, and that will isolate them from each other so that they cannot short out, just like that. And now this is not considered as a permanent fix. Please don't ever think that electrical tape on a connection is considered as permanent. It's as temporary as it comes. So this is kind of like the inside jacket. You are replacing the one that you stripped off, and it is not considered as a permanent means of isolation between those two circuits until you physically protect it. And that is what we are going to do with this heat shrink that we're sliding over top of it now. And we will put our pieces in there, slide this heat shrink over top, and by applying heat to that heat shrink, it will actually form a permanent part of this cord and seal everything together. So let me just get my heat gun and I'll apply the heat to that. You can see how it shrinks up. And I don't know how well the camera will show this, but just with a heat gun, you can apply heat to this tube and it will shrink right around your wire, forming a protective jacket, if you will, so that you're not getting shocked and so that that electrical tape that you placed on the inside around those conductors is now sealed in there in place and can't be removed. You can't slide it. It is in there good and tight, and there's no worries of that shorting out and causing any harm to anybody. So there you go. Good as new. And of course, the final step in all of this is I didn't want that base sticking out like a sore thumb, so I masked off the wire loom here that is around the neck, and I just gave it a blast of black spray paint, and it blends in quite nicely to complete our I guess our lamp saving, our lamp rescue, we'll call it. Either way, it's made it usable once again. And there you have it. A repaired desk lamp. Guys, if you think that this show was about building a silly little pine base for a desk lamp, you obviously don't watch my show very often, and you couldn't be further from the truth. Because what this is about is taking something that got damaged and would normally be thrown out and turning it into a usable piece once again by using your woodworking skill set to repair it. We live in such a disposable world where people just take things that get damaged or broken or don't look so pretty anymore, and they say, we'll just buy another one. It's only 20 bucks. It's only 30 bucks. It's only 10 bucks. It doesn't matter how much it costs. If you have the skill set to fix something, why not fix it and make it usable again? It just makes sense. It really makes sense. So it's not so much about repairing a desk lamp as it is repairing things around your home that you would normally throw out by using your woodworking to do so. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's not the sort of show that we normally do, but you know what? It's going to be useful to somebody out there. I just know it is. And I hope that you guys will come back and join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.